Hi, my name's Allegra Fenton.
Hey, it's Eloise with KidScoop Media.
I'm here with KidScoop Media, and we are here to interview.
I'm very excited to interview Dame Jacinda, and I have lots of questions I'm excited to ask her.
This is my first interview with KidScoop Media, and I'm very excited.
See you later. Hello, Dame Jacinda. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you for having me.
I read you were instrumental in New Zealand and Australia hosting the Women's World Cup in 2023. What did it mean to you and the country when New Zealand won their first World Cup game against Norway at home on opening night? What did you say to the team after the game?
I'm going to be honest with you. I went down to the changing rooms after that historic match and I started to give like a little speech and I just burst into tears. It was so historic to be able to have that moment for an incredible team, but to have it on home soil for such a significant game with the whole world watching, it was just a really special thing to watch.
Hello, Dame Jacinda. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
You can call me Jacinda.
Oh, Jacinda. Congratulations on being the first one in your family to go to college. How did your family react to you becoming Prime Minister?
If I'm honest, I think probably they're still a little bit in shock about the whole thing. I mean, I had been interested in politics since I was quite young, but I didn't think that would lead me to becoming a member of Parliament. I thought I would volunteer, deliver pamphlets, but then I got a job in Parliament, and over time I had the opportunity to go and do extra roles. And I remember a number of times saying no, because often I'd be asked to do things that I didn't think that I had the skills for. But eventually I was convinced, and that led me on a pathway to become Prime Minister. My parents have always been very supportive and very proud, but I think like most parents, they always worry about me in politics too. So I think now that I'm out, they're probably quite happy.
You have been an inspiration to so many politicians and leaders. I'm wondering which world leaders have most inspired you either in the past, present day, or in history? And which past or current leaders can you name that have led or currently lead with kindness?
Oh, a great question. You know, one of the people I talk about quite a bit, who I think was an empathetic leader, but there'll be a lot of people in the United States who'll know and understand this better, but FDR always seemed to me to be an empathetic leader, and he led during really difficult times, you know, the Great Depression and during World War II. And a lot of people think that he was empathetic because of his own personal experiences with his health. But it was a difficult time to be in charge, but he always took the time to explain to people why he was taking the decisions he took. He used to hold fireside chats where he would talk directly to the public, and there were stories of people pulling over in their cars in the middle of the street to be able to listen to him. But in my life, there are lots of people I've drawn inspiration from. Prime Ministers in New Zealand, a guy called Norman Kirk is a favourite of mine. He was a Prime Minister in the 1970s though, and so I never really was around for his leadership, but my dad named our cat after him, so that was how I knew he was special. When I was little though, one of my heroes was a guy called Ernest Shackleton. He was an Antarctic explorer, and I really liked him because even when times were really, really hard, and even when he was failing, he was always optimistic.
In your book, you talked about eating dinner while watching the 6 o'clock news. Mm-hmm. What was it like meeting the Queen for the first time after seeing her for so many years on the TV? Is there a memorable moment you can share with us?
So meeting Queen Elizabeth, you know, was really important for New Zealand because she's our head of state. And so it was part of my job that I would go and meet her. But you're right, I'd known about, and of course, grown up with Queen Elizabeth in magazines and in newspapers and on the television. When I was a girl, she always reminded me a little bit of my grandmother. And maybe that made it slightly less nerve-wracking when I met her for the first time. But there's a lot of protocols when you meet the Queen. The way that you're meant to walk into the room, where you're meant to face when you exit the room, you're meant to curtsy, and I got all of it wrong because I was so nervous. But she was so kind and really interested in New Zealand. But I remember when I met her, I asked her what it was like to be a mum. Yeah, I just wanted to know about the normal things in her life, and she was really thoughtful, but also very British. She told me that when you have kids, you just get on with it. But actually, it was probably pretty good advice.
I want to talk a little bit about your childhood. You said that as a child you always wanted to be useful. How has the urge to be helpful translated into your adult self?
I think one of the good things about wanting to having an objective like wanting to be useful rather than having a specific career in mind means that when I'd spent 15 years in politics and I thought, well, actually, I wonder now whether or not it'll be better if someone else does the job. It didn't mean that I lost my identity, and it didn't mean that I thought that I had no purpose in life anymore, because I was driven by being useful and doing something to make the world better. And politics is a great way to do that, but it's not the only way. So I think it's probably helped me, because there's lots of ways that you can feel useful, and it can be something as small as looking after a neighbour when they come home from hospital, right through to being Prime Minister. I get joy from the big and the little.
Given the current political climate and its threats to women's rights, what advice do you have for young women going into politics or government who want to make an impact on the world?
The first thing that I would say is that it is a place where you can make a difference. And from the outside, it looks like quite a scary place to be. It looks like a hard place to be, and some days it will be, but it's still worth it. I worry with all of the stories you hear about what you experience online and the misogyny that young women and women experience, that it might put people off. But that would be the worst possible thing, because we need our parliaments and we need our democracies to look like the communities they represent, and we need more women. And so I hope that anyone who might think that they're maybe a bit too sensitive for politics or be worried about being in the public eye, or maybe wanting to be a leader that's a little bit different to what you see now, might, I hope, look at my story and think, well, maybe there is a place, because I certainly think the world would be better if we had more humility and kindness and empathy in politics.
You lived in Murapura. Mm-hmm. Can you expand on how exactly the town influenced you?
So when I was really young, this was back when I'm just going on 5 years old, we moved to a little town in New Zealand of about 3,000 people called Murapura. And it was a town going through a really hard time. It was a lot of people had lost their jobs. They worked in forestry, and it was really changing. And there weren't a lot of other jobs to move into, so there was a lot of unemployment and there was a lot of poverty. And so I didn't start out as a little kid thinking, when I grow up I want to be a politician. I just remember seeing kids who were like me but didn't always have what I had. They might not have lunch at school, or it might be winter and they might not have shoes. And when you're a kid, you don't think about the politics, you just think that's not fair. And so that's why I think a lot of what ended up motivating me as a grown-up probably started out from me as a kid.
In your book you mentioned how your grandma came to visit you when you were sick, and she appeared with a violin that belonged to her mother. Did you ever learn to play it, and do you still have it?
That is the first time someone has asked me that question. So I learned how to play the violin before my nana gave me that particular violin. And I never really played that one, because when she gave it to me, the strings were broken, and I was little, so I didn't have the money to repair it. And then after a few years of learning, I never learned how to read music, so I'd always play by ear. And so I would have to memorize pieces. And as the pieces got more complex, it got harder for me to do that. I even went to violin camp. And I remember when everyone was out having fun in the obstacle course and on the flying fox. Do you call them a flying fox? I don't know how to translate that. You sit on a rope and it goes down like a zip line. You call it a zip line, we call it a flying fox. So everyone is out on the flying. I have, now that you mention it, no idea why it is called a flying fox. Foxes don't fly. But while they're all out having a great time on the zip line, I'm behind in the dorms trying to remember these really long pieces of music. So I came back from violin camp and I stopped. And it made me really sad, because it meant I never properly played my nana's violin, but I still, it was so important to me. I had it repaired when I was old enough to pay for it to be repaired anyway. Oh, I hate lightning rounds.
What is your Starbucks order?
Oh, I still try and order flat whites, and they always look at me like, what is that? So I end up with a flat white is like a New Zealand version of, it's kind of like a cappuccino. So I usually end up with a straight up cappuccino.
What is an item on your bucket list?
An item on my bucket list. Well, for a long time it was going to Antarctica, but I managed to do that at the end of 2022, which was pretty lucky. My bucket list, I would like to take my father to Japan. Mm-hmm.
What book are you reading?
I've got quite a few on my list at the moment. James, I would like to read. What else? I just finished reading not long ago The Bee Sting, which was really great, but James is my next on my list. Mm-hmm.
If you could invite any other world leader to dinner, who would it be?
Any other world leader? Anyone? Living or dead? Any living or dead world leader? I think, she's still living, the ex-president of Chile, Michelle Bachelet, is amazing. There's not many world leaders who have experienced what it is to live under dictatorship and to have family members imprisoned and to still lead with such grace. Yeah, she's phenomenal. Yeah. And I have managed to have dinner with her, so lucky me.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much. It's been so nice to chat with you both. Great.
Hello, it's Eloise with KidScoop Media. I just finished a great interview with Dame Jacinda. She's such a welcoming and kind person and very warm and thoughtful. I'm very excited to see her new documentary called Prime Minister that's coming out soon. This is my first assignment and it was great. Eloise signing off.